From an airport within the mountains of Nepal with an alarmingly short and steep runway, to an airport built directly next to a busy beach that forces planes to fly dangerously low past tourists, here are 5 of the most dangerous airports in the world. The country of Nepal is located in a very high up and isolated part of the world. With much of the country situated within the Himalayan mountains, it leaves very little room for any sort of an airport. But because of how remote many of the villages are and the importance of receiving supplies, something had to be done. So, engineers constructed the Tenzing Hillary Airport, one of the most technically challenging and fear-inducing airports in the world. Also known as Lukla Airport, it is frequented by travelers who aspire to climb Mount Everest. So, as you could probably imagine, the airport is surrounded on all sides by the steep Himalayan terrain, with a mountain shelf on one side and a steep drop into the valley on the other. So, even navigating into this area is a challenge by itself. However, the danger does not stop there. The airport runway is extremely short, measuring only 527 meters, or 1,739 feet long. Given these various factors, only helicopters and small fixed-wing propeller planes are permitted to land. In actuality, they're about the only planes that could land. The small runway presents incredible challenges. For planes looking to land, it leaves little room to stop. For planes that are looking to take off, it is very difficult to gain enough speed to produce lift. So, in order to help counter these difficulties, the runway had to be constructed with a slope. With a gradient of 12%, pilots now have a bit of extra room to take off. But these pilots only have one chance at hitting their mark, as there are no go-around procedures. It can be attacked from one direction and one direction only. And once you're committed, there is no going back. On top of all of that, since 1973, there have been many accidents reported at this location. The country of Bhutan is located just east of Nepal and north of Bangladesh. Just like Nepal, there is little room for airports here due to the towering Himalayan mountains. But in order to get critical supplies here, one was built: the Paro International Airport. In actuality, it's the only international airport in the entire country. Incidentally, it is also the world's most dangerous airport. This time, though, it isn't due to a short runway. Paro International Airport was built in a deep valley, one of the only places with enough room for a runway and terminal. Strong winds whip through the valley, often resulting in severe turbulence. There have only been a few planes that have crashed as a result of the wind. But the wind isn't the only thing posing a danger here. The mountains completely hide the runway on approach. Pilots have to navigate a series of turns through the mountains in order to get the proper approach for landing. The runway only comes into sight just before the wheels touch down. Now, because of these dangerous factors, a rule has been put into place which restricts pilots from taking off or landing at night. The undulating terrain, unpredictable weather patterns, and nearly 45-degree drop just before landing render the aircraft's instruments useless. So, everything is done with visual cues. Only a limited number of pilots in the world are authorized to land at Paro. Now, there are plenty of things that make a runway dangerous for pilots to land on. Most of the time, it's either the surrounding terrain or the length of the actual runway. However, at the Madeira International Airport in Portugal, pilots tread carefully because of the runway's construction. As a matter of fact, the runway that exists today isn't even the original runway. When it was first constructed, it was only 1,600 meters long, which is just under a mile. Now, in terms of runways, this is incredibly short. Then, you have to take geography into account. On one side of the runway are high mountains. On the other side is the ocean. To top it all off, there are consistently high winds. It is the combination of these elements that caused the plane to crash in 1977. The Boeing 727 fell off the end of the runway onto the beach below, taking the lives of 164 people. It was decided at that time to construct an extension of the runway to allow airplanes more room to take off and land. The only problem was that the runway ended at the edge of the ocean, so engineers designed a runway bridge. This runway bridge, or extension, goes right over a section of sea and is supported by 180 columns. These columns have to withstand the incredible shock that is put on them when these humongous planes land. This unique construction, mixed with the high winds and dangerous geography, make it one of the most dangerous airports in the world to land at. In order to land here, pilots have to undergo additional training. Now, various Caribbean islands are known for having dangerous airports. One of the most famous is located on the island of St. Martin, where the runway begins only feet from a public beach. Even though that presents its own challenge, it doesn't compare to the Huancho Airport that was built on the minuscule island of Saba, which is about 28 miles off of St. Martin. The island is small enough as it is, leaving little room for an airport. But, just as we've previously seen, where there's a will, there's a way. So, an airport was built. Huancho Airport is known for having the world's shortest commercial runways, much shorter than the ones located in France and Nepal. Here, the runway only measures 400 meters, or 1,300 feet in length. The typical airport runway for commercial airliners measures anywhere between 8,000 and 13,000 feet long. That means that only certain aircraft can land here, after they have waivers from the Netherlands Antilles Civil Aviation Authority. Now, it's hard enough for pilots to use every single inch of runway available to them, but here they have to do it while surrounded by rocky outcrops and sharp drop-offs into the ocean. So, there is absolutely no margin for error. One false move and you're either crashing into the side of a mountain or sliding off the end of the runway into the sea below. The only reprieve that pilots have is the ability for go-around procedures. The French Alps are known worldwide for having some of the best ski slopes. People travel from near and far to enjoy time in the snow and take in the amazing scenery of the jagged and snow-capped peaks. But, just like in Nepal, some parts of the French Alps are nearly impossible to reach, making the need for an airport very high. So, the cool Chevelle Airport was built. Just like the Tenzing Hillary Airport in Nepal, it is incredibly difficult to get to and even harder to land. Nearly every dangerous element that exists for the airport in Nepal also exists for this one in France. The runway is 525 meters or 1,722 feet long. It is surrounded by mountains on every side, and there's a cliff at the end of the runway. Also mirroring its counterpart in Nepal, the runway was built on a slope. However, the gradient of this slope is 18.6%, giving pilots even more uphill or downhill help depending on whether they're taking off or landing. So many dangerous factors exist here that only a handful of pilots are permitted to land. There is one thing that separates this airport from its twin in Nepal, though. During takeoffs and landings, pilots have to maneuver their aircraft between the monstrous Alps without the assistance of their onboard instruments. Everything is done visually. The only directive that exists is the no-go-around rule, meaning that the runway can only be approached and departed from in one direction. As pilots spend the vast majority of their time relying on their instruments, this added element greatly narrows down the field of qualified people to operate here. Aviation has become one of the safest modes of travel, but when it comes to dangerous airports, things get a little tricky. Landing or taking off from these places requires a certain level of human skill and a bit of guts. Have you ever been to any of these locations? Let us know in the comments. With that, thanks for watching and tune in next time.